Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third lecture in this concentration on grammar and style. So what will we focus on in this lecture? Adjectives and adverbs. So adjectives. What are the types of adjectives? And again, we are in Chicago Manual of Style. We are around Rule 5.68, 5.69, that area. For those of you following along. So an adjective is a word that modifies a noun or pronoun. And sometimes we call it a describing word. It describes a noun or pronoun. So it tells you how big, how small, what kind, how many, that sort of thing. Now a lot of times, what's called a suffix, that is a thing that's appended to the end of the word, there are certain types of these suffixes that are typical of adjectives, right? So the suffix al, able, ary, en, ful, ly, ous, those sorts of suffixes. Those kind of distinguish adjectives. That's adjectives. Now we have this thing called proper adjectives. And usually these are adjectives that are derived from a proper name. And they are capitalized. So things like Cuban cigar, American dollar, Taiwan dollar, that sort of thing. So we've taken a proper name and made it an adjective. So now moving to articles as limiting adjectives. So first, what's an article? So an article is what's called a limiting adjective that precedes a noun. And this refers to something definite or indefinite. Definite, meaning using the, or indefinite, using a or an. So, definite meaning there is typically something specific you are referring to. The book, the cup I am holding, the tea I drink. Contrast that with a cup. It could be any cup. A car, not the car, the particular car. So definite and if indefinite. So definite is pointing to a definite object. Or something that's about to be described. Like the sights of Chicago, right? Or is important. And the example here is the grand prize, right? It's something definite, but as opposed to a grand prize. So, and we can use definite articles with the singular nouns or plural. The cup, the cups. Now, indefinite article points to a non-specific thing. So something that is in general, right? Like a car, a cup. It can be singular or uncountable. The thing may be singular or uncountable. Or more generalized, right? In the example they give is an idea inspired by Milton's Paradise Lost. An idea. So now, sometimes indefinite articles in specific reference. So sometimes the indefinite article will provide a specific reference. So, for example, here they give is, I saw a great movie last night. Well, it's the movie you saw last night. But in this specific situation, we would use a. You wouldn't say, I saw the great movie last night. So the question of using a or an, and this is an important explanation. So with the indefinite article, we choose a or an. So how do we choose? It depends on the sound of the word that follows. So a goes before words with a consonant sound. And remember, it doesn't matter how the word is spelled. Right? It has to do with the sound. So an comes before words with a vowel sound. A cup. It's a consonant sound. An insurance agent. An hour ago. History, we typically use a. Now, what about abbreviations? So here we always go with the sound of the abbreviation. So, for example, the examples they give are ABTU, right? A PDF file. Now, if you look at something like MBA, we would use an, right? Because M, the first sound is a vowel in MBA. So an MBA degree, NATM, that sort of thing. So you always go by the sound of the how it begins. Now, 5.75, articles with coordinate nouns. So when you have a series of nouns, series of coordinate nouns, the article may go before each noun, but it doesn't have to. So you could say the cup and mouse are on the table, or you could say the cup and the mouse are on the table. Now, 5.76, the effect of an article on meaning. Now, the articles have what the Chicago Manual style refers to as demonstrative value. So we can change the meaning depending on the article. So one example they give, which is a good example. So a question: do you like the red and blue cloth? Right. Do you like my blue and gold cup? The first example suggests that there is one cloth, and that one cloth contains both red and blue threads. Same thing. There's one cup explaining. There's one cup that is blue and gold. Now, if you say, do you like the red and the blue cloth? Now, this kind of suggests that there are two cloths. One is red, one is blue. Do you like the blue and the gold cup? This suggests that there are two cups now. One is blue and one is gold. You could kind of make it clear by using a hyphenate a phrase, like a compound modifier: red and blue cloth, red hyphen and hyphen blue cloth. Or you could repeat the word cloth in the other situation. So you could say the red cloth and the blue cloth, the red, the blue cup, and the gold cup, to be clear that there are two cups, one of which is blue, one of which is gold. This is important because, so for example, in contract language, are you referring to two articles, or are you two items, or are you referring to one item when describing something in a contract? So, what is the position of adjectives? So the basic rule for the position of adjectives is such. The adjective, if it modifies a noun, it goes before the noun. This is called a attributive adjective. That's right. A blue cup. A spectacular view. Right? A good view. Now, adjectives after the possessive. So when we have a noun phrase that includes a possessive noun, right? The teacher's cup, the teacher's mug. Then the adjective will follow the possessive. So the teacher's blue cup. So you put it after the possessive. You wouldn't say the blue teacher's cup, unless you were suggesting that I am blue, the blue teacher's cup. Otherwise, it's the teacher's blue cup. So the predicate adjective is an adjective that follows a linking verb, but it modifies the subject, right? So the example given in the Chicago Manual of Style is, the child is afraid. Right? So the fearful child, right? Or the child is afraid. The night became colder. The night became colder. So the cold night. I feel bad. I feel good. So those are predicate adjectives. And they follow linking verbs. So be verbs, for example. So the date as adjective. So dates are used as adjectives. So the rule that the Chicago Manual Style gives, if a month year or month day is used as an adjective, no hyphen or comma. So the March 1st festivities. But if a full month, day, year date is used, then a comma is both before and after the year. So this can make some people kind of uncomfortable. So the example they gave is the May 27th, 2016, ceremonies. So the comma goes before and after the year. So it's awkward because it contains two commas. You can avoid this by just changing it around to say something like the commencement ceremonies on May 27th, 2016. That's perfectly fine. So the degree of adjectives. So what does this mean? So adjectives are gradable, or you can separate them into 3 degrees. The positive or absolute, that is, the example there is like hard. The comparative, something is more or less than another. So harder, this is harder than that. And then superlative, meaning the highest, right? In this example, the hardest. So English legal writing is a hard class. English legal writing is harder than civil code topics. And English legal writing is the hardest class. So the positive adjective just describes the quality of the thing, right? English legal writing is hard. English legal writing is difficult. A blue cup. But the comparative adjective talks about the relationship between two items, right? The bluer cup, or the bluer of the two, more, yes. The cheaper ticket, right? And you noticed when I was hesitating on blue, so the suffix er is signals the comparative form, right? If there's two or more syllables, right? And the example here is light and lighter, merry and merrier. If there is a adjective with three or more syllables, then you got to add more, or less, or fewer, whatever. So instead of the er suffix, so for example, intelligent. So intelligent, right? There's three or more syllables. You wouldn't say intelligenter. You would say more intelligent, right? And the other example they give is purposeful. You would say more purposeful. You wouldn't say purposefuler. I often catch myself having to count the syllables in a word to make sure I'm doing this correctly. And superlative adjectives. So the superlative is usually comparing three or more things, and there's an intensity about it, and ends in usually est, right? So, and again, the having one or two syllables. So, blue, bluest, lighter, lightest, and with three or more syllables, you have to use most again. So the example they give, humorous, most humorous. You wouldn't say humoristist, that sort of thing. So now equal and unequal comparisons. So the higher degree of comparison, we use er or est, or by more or most, depending on the syllables of the word, right? The lower degree is using less or least, right? So if you have something like cold, you would say less cold, right? Higher degree would be colder, right? Or coldest. But if it's a lower degree, you would have less cold and least cold. So special types of adjectives. Adjectives as nouns. So there is an adjective to noun shift. We can call this an adnoun, common in English. The example they give, and a post-mortem examination. So if someone has died or there was a crime. Post-mortem, meaning after death. An examination of the body after death. Sometimes we just call this a post-mortem, right? So this adjective, the type of an examination, meaning a post-mortem examination. Sometimes the shift of the adjective to the noun is simply a post-mortem. The Chicago Manual of Style warns on using these sparingly and after careful consideration. And sometimes in the law, it's especially better to be more descriptive and not leave anything up to interpretation for the reader. So adverbs. Adverbs generally. So what is an adverb? It's a word that qualifies, limits, describes, or modifies a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. So the examples they give, she studied constantly, right? How much did she study? Constantly. Qualifies the verb study. We could have something like really unusual. This cup is really unusual. So the really qualifies the adjective unusual. This cup is really pretty. The cyclist pedaled very swiftly is the other example. And very qualifies the adverb swiftly, right? Very swiftly, as opposed to just swiftly. So in 5.157, we have sentence adverbs. This is an adverb that modifies, that can modify an entire sentence. And most commonly, you'll see this as something like maybe, possibly, and however. So for the example they give is, unfortunately, we've had rain this week. Right? Separated by a comma a lot. Adverbial suffixes. Sometimes adverbs are distinguished by the suffix ly, or ic, or aly. But sometimes we have adverbs without suffixes. So, for example, we have adverbs like almost, never, now, just, to, too, to. So, position of adverbs. Where do we place the adverbs? This is difficult, but the general rule is that the adverb should be as close as possible to the word it's modifying. So as close as possible to the verb or adverb as possible. So the example they give that can highlight some ambiguities, they being the Chicago Manual of Style, is the marathoners submitted their applications to compete immediately. So the question is, what does immediately modify? The compete part or the submit part? Are they trying to compete immediately, or have they submitted their application? Have they submitted immediately? So to change this word, you could, or this sentence, to make it more understandable, would be the marathoners immediately submitted their applications to compete. So now we know that the immediately refers to the submitted piece. Or you could say the marathoners submitted their applications to immediately compete. And finally, adverbs that modify words other than verbs. So in this situation, if an adverb modifies an adjective or an adverb, it should immediately precede the word. And the example they give is, our vacation was very short. Very short. This one is a little bit easier to see and understand. So with verbs as close as possible, any other word with words other than verbs immediately preceding that the word is modifying. So that's all I'd like to talk about in this video on adjectives and adverbs. Thanks everybody, and I'll see you in the next video.